Now imagine there's tools for consumer protection, for data privacy that you can access low cost or close to free that actually empowers you, an individual or a small business, to be legally compliant, because before this you couldn't afford it. And I think that's where the real key is with artificial intelligence. Of course, the policy document is not a regulation. It's basically telling us what the road ahead is in South Africa when it comes to AI, and it covers a number of different things, everything from infrastructure development to employment to education to awareness, including regulation. And so we need to be aware of how cybercrime has evolved and how much easier it is for even a layperson to engage in cybercrime now because of how easy AI is making it. And yes, the popular tools have guardrails in place to try and prevent you from doing a lot of these things. But, we've got another whole side of the internet where guardrails don't exist.
This episode of ITWeb TV is brought to you in association with ITWeb Security Summit, celebrating 20 years of bringing together the cybersecurity industry. Visit itweb.coza for more information.
Welcome to another episode of ITWeb TV. Today we are speaking to Nerushka Bowan, who is the founder and MD of LITT Institute. We are speaking to Nerushka ahead of the ITWeb Security Summit, which is scheduled for 27 May in Cape Town, as well as 3 and 4 June in Johannesburg at the Central Convention Center. Nerushka is an AI, tech, and privacy expert. Welcome to ITWeb TV, Nerushka.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here today.
Awesome. Nerushka, just to start with, we understand you are one of the speakers at the upcoming ITWeb Security Summit. If you can just give us some highlights of what the delegates should expect from your talk at the summit without giving too much away. Of course, you still want them to attend the event.
Sure. So I'm going to be talking about quite a new topic, and perhaps for some people, the first time they're going to hear about this topic, and that is quantum computing. Now, on the tech side, we've seen so many developments over the last few months in quantum computing that it might be within reach that we're going to have commercial quantum computing in the not so distant future. A couple of years ago, it was completely science fiction to think about quantum computing. But now, because of these developments, there's a number of cybersecurity issues that come with these developments, especially in the world of cryptography and encryption. And I'm really going to break down what quantum computing is, why it's important for organizations to understand it now, and what the road looks like ahead.
Awesome. I can't wait to listen to your talk. Of course, we don't want to give too much away because we still want our delegates to hear directly from you, Nerushka. I understand also you are the founder of the LITT Institute. If you can tell us what is the LITT Institute and what are you guys doing at the LITT Institute?
Sure. So LITT stands for Law, Innovation, Technology, Tomorrow. And it really brings together both my expertise and passions as a former tech and privacy lawyer, and now really trying to bridge the gap between law and technology by educating others. We host a number of programs. For example, in June, we'll be hosting the Gen AI Legal Accelerator, which is a 12-hour program over 4 days that really helps get you up to speed with all the latest developments in generative AI. And we have a host of other programs as well. We do lots of corporate training, keynote talks, at anything at the intersection of law and technology.
Interesting. Just maybe to go to the LITT Institute, I understand you are a tech law expert.
Yes.
And you were speaking about Gen AI just now. I've been reading in the media, these technologies are impacting the legal fraternity just as they are impacting all the other industries. How are these emerging technologies like artificial intelligence affecting like the law industry as we traditionally knew it?
Sure. I mean, it's been such an interesting development since we got, ChatGPT a couple of years ago to see how lawyers and the legal fraternity has embraced generative AI. Now, we're talking about a fraternity that historically has been very technology averse. It's usually been a long road to get people to use new technologies. But what we've seen with generative AI is people are using it even when they shouldn't be using it. That's how much they loving it. And what's actually happened is that because they don't understand how it works, what the risks are, they are finding themselves in hot water. So we've had lawyers all over the world who've jumped on the bandwagon. They've heard about this amazing tool, ChatGPT, and they've turned to it for things like legal research to find cases. They've ended up citing those cases in court documents. And then when they've been asked to produce those papers in court, they go and look for it and they realize this doesn't exist because that was actually an hallucinated case, completely made up, and they didn't realize that ChatGPT could do something like that. So on one hand, we've seen keen interest from the legal fraternity, a nice uptake in that sense, but we also still need to bridge that knowledge gap in terms of what can you use it for, what can't you use it for. On the other hand, we also have a number of, I would call them vertical AIs that have been created. So tools built on top of your popular generative AI tools that are focused on legal use cases, things like contract drafting, due diligence, contract review, all of these type of things. And we're seeing a lot of law firms now license these tools and try to use them within their work environment. I would say, we have a couple of first mover lawyers and law firms who are kind of benefiting from this. But in the majority case, we don't have that widespread adoption. And there is a conundrum, the innovator's dilemma, when it comes to the legal fraternity, and that is they historically have sold time. That is the billable hour. So if your contract takes 10 hours to draft, you times that 10 hours by your hourly rate, and that's what you're charging the client. Now, if I'm giving you a tool that's going to make you be able to draft the same document in 1 hour, from a lawyer's perspective, how am I going to now charge the client? What used to cost me 10 hours is only going to cost me 1 hour. And so there's more than just adoption that needs to happen in legal fraternity. We also have to relook at things like the business model, how we charge clients, as we adopt these tools into our organization. So it's a much bigger conversation, but it's definitely, we are seeing some movement.
Interesting. I was actually reading like an article. It's not only, I think there was a law firm in South Africa which got into hot soup, as you mentioned, after they used ChatGPT for research. So can you actually use it in a right way without getting into trouble? Or you can't just use it you can use it for certain things, but not use it for maybe research in this instance?
So the first part is also to empower yourself and educate yourself. If you understand the tool, how it works, and what its limitations are, then you're able to use it in a much safer way where you will know that hallucination is a risk. And so you're not going to blindly rely on the information it gives you because you're going to fact check it before you use it in your client work. That's one example. You see, these are large language models. So they've been trained to predict the next word and tell you what you want to hear. They haven't been necessarily trained for high levels of accuracy. Yes, we are getting other models now that are coming through that have much higher accuracy rates. And so we're seeing that hallucination risk drop off a little bit, but it's never going to be completely extinct. However, when it comes to brainstorming, coming up with ideas, looking at things from different angles, adjusting things for tone, and especially if you're an expert in an area, you'll be able to pick up false information so quickly because you're already an expert. But if you're now going into an area of law that you don't know much about, if the tool tells you something that's false, without double checking it, you're actually never going to know. So it comes with usage, it comes with understanding how the tools work. That's when you'll find your true use cases. What I found, for example, the AI agents that have now been released, ChatGPT has one called Deep Research, where it thinks for like up to 20 minutes on a question you might give it. It trawls and it provides citations for everything that it puts in its research report. And the standard that you get from these more advanced and sophisticated tools seem to be a little bit more useful, almost like a junior associate that would be working for you compiling a research report. So again, it depends what tools you're using, how you're using it, and do you actually understand the limitations of those tools. I always tell people, don't start with a use case that's going to get you into trouble. Now, why start using ChatGPT for client work? Why not start using it for like, what must I cook for dinner? Create an image, a cartoon of me riding a bicycle. Start using it for things that are not going to get you into trouble, because that's how you learn. Learn through play, be curious, experiment. And when you understand prompting a little bit more how it works, you can maybe start thinking about other use cases, bearing in mind client confidentiality, privacy, and those risks as well.
Interesting. You mentioned that it can act like you as your junior attorney. So are there worries within the legal fraternity that these emerging technologies are going to take away lawyers' jobs?
Yeah, so I think that's a worry across industries, not just in the legal fraternity, but definitely also within the legal fraternity. We're seeing, that fear come about to how will junior lawyers be trained if the AI is drafting everything? How will we do this if AI is, doing everything? And that fear is not misplaced. But I do think, as with any technology and any kind of digital transformation that we go through, yes, our roles may shift, things may be different, it may not be the way it's always has been, but we're not going to ever replace humans. Sometimes, the comfort of a human, picking up the phone and making and getting a human to solve your problem, that's what lawyers are there for. We're there to provide empathy, to connect with individuals, to build relationships over a long time, and we're there to help people and solve their problems and comfort them when they're in a time of need and stress. And if we focus on those characteristics, rather than the pure automation and of doing some logical activity like finding every termination clause in an agreement, because we end up acting like robots, sifting through hundreds of documents looking for this one termination clause and putting it in a spreadsheet. Now, if we can automate that with high levels of accuracy, why not? And let us focus on the human elements of the job.
Great. Yeah. I can imagine like getting legal advice from a robot. Of course, you'd want maybe someone to talk to. It's just like, okay. But I'm just thinking, like, as we train these models more and more, do you think we'll get to a time when maybe some of your clients would just go to ChatGPT and defend themselves using like ChatGPT?
Yeah, so there is some tools already in the US, couple of years ago already, where, for example, if you got a parking ticket. Now, look at the cost of a parking ticket. You're not going to be able to afford to hire a lawyer to defend you for a wrong parking ticket, right? So there's this tool called Do Not Pay, where you can chat with that tool and it will draft your court papers for you based on the information you provide that you can then take to court to defend yourself from that parking ticket. It's expanded now to things like airline flights and so on. But we're already starting to see tools like that using AI where you can just engage directly with the AI. And what I would say is there's such a big access to justice gap. Who actually hires a lawyer? It's people like the blue chip companies, JSE listed companies who have large legal budgets that can afford lawyers. There's a small subset of people in the pro bono category who qualify for pro bono services through clinics and things like that who have legal services. For everybody else, small to medium businesses and everyday people, it's only when we have some big life event. So we're getting married, we need to sign an antenuptial contract, we have to see a lawyer. We're buying a house, we have to do the transfer papers, we see a lawyer. We're drafting a will, we see a lawyer. But for other everyday stuff, we're just kind of winging it. Now imagine there's tools for consumer protection, for data privacy, that you can access low cost or close to free, that actually empowers you, an individual or a small business, to be legally compliant, because before this you couldn't afford it. And I think that's where the real key is with artificial intelligence, not to replace lawyers as a profession, but to help us close that access to justice gap where there's a whole lot of people that can't actually afford legal services.
Yeah, interesting. And here in Africa, do we have those services yet, or we are still trying to, like the one that you mentioned about not paying parking tickets?
So we don't have that particular one, but we have a number, for example, that are embedded in WhatsApp, where you can actually just chat on WhatsApp to this bot and it'll give you some advice. So we're seeing now the rise of these type of tools, even in South Africa. Of course, there is a fine line that these tools have to kind of navigate, because we also have the Legal Practice Council, which regulates the legal profession. And if you start now delving into the ambit of what a qualified licensed legal professional or lawyer is doing, you may find yourself in hot water if you have an AI that's purporting to do those type of tools. So yes, there's a lot that you can cover in terms of these tools, and we are seeing an increase in those tools even locally. But there is a line that has to be balanced when you're doing these things.
Awesome. Thanks, Nerushka. Also, looking at the regulation that you've just mentioned, I understand South Africa is developing an AI framework.
Yes.
Where are we in terms of how to regulate these emerging technologies?
Sure. So in South Africa, we had something called the Draft AI Policy Framework, which was published last year. It was open for comment until November. And now what they've done is they've basically compiled all those comments and they've put together the next draft. So if I'm not mistaken, the first draft had 9 pillars that it was looking at, and the new draft has 14 pillars. So it's quite an expanded version of what we saw last year. And it's really taken into account a lot of the industry comments from various stakeholders that they received. That draft, as I understand it, is sitting with the minister for signature. So it's already been kind of compiled. And once the minister has signed it, we will get the next version of that published for comment again. So it will be this year. Exact dates when we're going to get that, it's in the pipeline. So I don't know the exact dates, but I know everybody's quite excited to see the next version, to be part of the journey in terms of what AI regulation looks like in the country. So of course, the policy document is not a regulation. It's basically telling us what the road ahead is in South Africa when it comes to AI. And it covers a number of different things, everything from infrastructure development to employment to education to awareness, including regulation. And so today, even though we don't have a comprehensive AI regulation, there's a number of laws that may still apply to AI tools. So for example, we have our Protection of Personal Information Act. So if you're using any AI tools and there's personal information that you are now processing in those tools, you have to be cognizant of our POPIA. And the information regulator has even said, we will be looking at AI tools when it is processing personal information. If you're in one of the heavily regulated sectors like banking or insurance, they've got a host of, a tech-focused and cyber-focused guidelines and measures that you also have to comply with. AI that you're implementing may be triggering some of those guidelines and regulations, and so you have to be cognizant of that as well. So don't feel like because we don't have something called an AI regulation that there's no laws that apply. You have to look at what data you're using, what use case you're doing, what industry you're operating in, and you'll find that there are a number of laws that you still need to comply with.
Oh, okay. So a framework is not a law per se. It's just like guideline, if I'm...
Yes, but not even a guideline. It's more like a roadmap. So it's telling us this is what's coming in South Africa in the years ahead. We may be seeing a draft regulation a year or two from now.
Okay.
And as you know, in the legislative process, once we have a draft regulation, it takes a couple of years sometimes for that to actually become a law. As we've seen with AI, things generally go a little bit faster. So who knows? Maybe that won't be a 10-year journey. It might be a 3 or 4 year journey, which is quite fast from a legislative perspective. But just having the policy or the framework itself doesn't put obligations on corporates. It kind of just tells us this is what's coming up, this is what we need to prepare for, these are the opportunities that will be coming. And it's only when we have legislation that has been passed through Parliament will that actually be something we have to now sit and comply with.
Interesting. I understand the European Union already has like an AI. I
Yes.
don't know, is it a framework?
So in the EU, they have an AI Act,
Okay.
and that came into force last year. And the first deadline was actually February this year. So companies who were subject to the EU AI Act had to ensure AI literacy requirements, meaning that everybody in the organization needed to be trained and aware of AI and understand how to use AI in that organization depending on their roles. The other thing that came into force was prohibition on certain AI systems. So systems that were manipulative, who are basing your social scoring on, for example, like your personality or your social media posts. So there's a variety of things that have been banned in the EU. And if you are trying to create an AI that falls within one of those banned or prohibited use cases, you can find yourself in hot water in the EU. Now that is a law, and we're going to see a couple of other deadlines come in where there will be more regulations for our general purpose AI. So that is our ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and the rest of them. We're going to see some obligations come in for high risk AI. So if you're operating in the EU and you are using high risk AI, you're going to see additional obligations coming up on you. And so this is a little bit different than the EU GDPR, which we had a couple of years ago. That was a much wider ambit. A lot more organizations were kind of covered within that ambit, and it almost became like a global legislation. With the EU AI Act, the scope is a little bit more limited because a lot of the obligations are focused on companies operating in the EU or AI that is being used or deployed in the EU, as well as high-risk use of AI. So if you fall outside of those categories, it's unlikely that the act will be triggered for you. Now, the other question a lot of people ask is, will other jurisdictions follow a similar approach to the EU AI Act? It's called the Brussels effect. When we get something in the EU, the rest of the world seems to copy-paste that dynamic, and we saw that with the GDPR. I think it's unlikely we're going to get an EU AI Act kind of flavor all over the world because the EU AI Act is based on product liability legislation, which is a little bit of a different approach that we're seeing being taken in some of the other jurisdictions. In South Africa, for example, I predict a more human rights-based approach when it comes to our AI legislation. And so, yes, they may take influence from the EU AI Act because it's one of the first kind of enforced legislations we have in the world. But I don't think we're going to see the exact kind of same version being copy-pasted throughout the world.
Great stuff. You also mentioned earlier, Nerushka, that we're still at the framework stage now, which is like telling maybe organizations like what is coming. But we see other regions like we're discussing now, the EU already has got like an EU AI Act. Do you think we will not lag behind because these technologies are always changing? Like now we have DeepSeek and we don't know what's coming. And by the time maybe we finally enact our own South African AI Act, do you think it will still be relevant by then?
Now, that's a very good question. And I think what often happens, especially in the tech space, and this is applying to any technology, when there's regulatory uncertainty, we can sometimes find ourselves in this gray area where organizations, companies, startups, entrepreneurs don't know how safe it is to operate in an environment because of the lack of regulatory certainty. And in other jurisdictions where we have more certainty, you then start seeing them almost flock to those regions because there's promotion of, there's steps, there's guidelines, it's a bit more clear. And so we've seen that approach, for example, when we had the cryptocurrency kind of boom, we saw certain jurisdictions kind of becoming leaders in that because they implemented regulation, which is quite interesting because often we used to see regulation as a hurdle to innovation. But what we are now seeing is regulation can also be a way to promote innovation if it's done in the right way. So yes, there is a risk that if we wait too long to put some guidance in place, that yes, we can be left behind and we could be overtaken by other jurisdictions who are moving faster than us, providing that clarity and certainty, welcoming that kind of investment into their ecosystem. Even for us, what we're already seeing in terms of barriers to entry is a lot of our startups find it difficult to receive funding while in the country due to existing Reserve Bank regulations and things like that. So even those who are trying to build locally are sometimes, when they get to that point where they want to scale and they've secured funding maybe from the US, they're then being told, in order to proceed, you have to list offshore, which is not great for our country. And we do need to see, how do we create an ecosystem where we can build homegrown companies who are able to receive funding and grow from the ground up, as opposed to list offshore.
Interesting. Thanks, Nerushka. Just going back maybe to the cybersecurity theme ahead of the Security Summit, of course. We also know that we have got the Cybercrimes Act in South Africa. Does it also cater for these emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence?
Sure. So where I'm seeing the Cybercrime Act become quite relevant is in the realm of deepfakes. So there is some new crimes that were set out in those legislations around, for example, things like revenge porn, and where you create these deep fakes and you then distribute that onto social media platforms. Now, these cybercrime bill and Cybercrime Act and things like that were drafted technology neutral, which is a good thing, because we're looking more at the end product as opposed to whether AI was used or not. And so when we're looking at it from that perspective now, with the latest developments in these technologies and how easy it is to create some of this content and these deep fakes, we will see things like, hopefully, like the Cybercrime Act coming into to enforce when things go wrong in that field. So that's how we kind of will see things like Cybercrime Act playing a role. The other thing is, we're seeing a big rise in the amount of scams and fraud and phishing and vishing and all of those things, because now you just need a couple of minutes of somebody's voice and you can clone their voice and create fake phone calls. You just need a couple of minutes of video and you can create a fake video avatar. And we've just had a case where, not in South Africa, I heard of it in another country, where there was a Zoom meeting with the CEO, and this person believed they were talking to the CEO, but it was a fake AI avatar of the CEO that was actually attending that Zoom meeting using AI, and this person got tricked into thinking he was talking to his CEO on Zoom. And so we need to be aware of how cybercrime has evolved and how much easier it is for even a layperson to engage in cybercrime now, because of how easy AI is making it. And yes, the popular tools have guardrails in place to try and prevent you from doing a lot of these things. But, we've got another whole side of the internet where guardrails don't exist. And if you really want to do something nefarious, you'll find a tool that will be able to guide you and do it for you. And so our cybercrime legislation becomes important in combating a lot of these types of issues.
Interesting. I can imagine believing that I'm talking to my CEO and I'm actually speaking to a fake thing. Yeah, that's actually scary.
It's very scary.
Yeah. And maybe also because of these, evolving threats like your deepfakes, and the good thing is, like, we've got the Cybercrimes Act, but are our law enforcement agents quite prepared to tackle with some of these things, especially like things that are happening on social media? People use fake accounts, ghost accounts, sometimes it's even bots, and how prepared are our law enforcement to deal with these emerging threats?
So, definitely there's still a knowledge gap in terms of what our legislation says and how these things are being enforced in practice. We have pockets of excellence within the organizations who are highly specialized to kind of deal with these issues. However, they also have limited capacity. So while we do have the expertise, I would agree that it's not widespread enough. And there are a number of initiatives within, the force to educate and spread that awareness. But I've heard countless issues where, somebody would go to a police station to try and open up a case in terms of the Cybercrimes Act and basically be turned away because the people within that police station don't actually know anything about that legislation. And that's definitely happening as well. So if you can find the right people to speak to, and get hold of the expertise within law enforcement that can assist you, you can probably get some kind of traction. But unfortunately, that is not, we're not at a stage yet where that education and awareness is widespread among the entire enforcement agency. And in addition to that, the enforcement part is one where there's investigation and compiling of the docket and the case, but that also needs to be handed then over to a prosecutor who's then meant to prosecute that criminal in court. Sometimes, even if the work is done by the one side, if on the prosecution side we're also lacking on that know-how and that expertise, again, we may see that case falling flat. The other issue that we have, especially with cybercrime, these crimes can be committed by people all over the world. We don't know sometimes who they are, where they are, and we can't even find them. So yes, you may be able to open up the case, have an investigation, find all the right people, but if you can't actually locate the criminal at the other end of the computer, there's only so far that you can go. So yes, it's great to have cybercrime legislation. It is helpful and it does get us far, but there's certain situations where unfortunately there's actually nothing that can be done.
Out of interest, Nerushka, I know the legal field was largely like paper-based. Are lawyers still carrying those huge briefcases in this digital age when they are going to the courts?
It depends on the lawyer, to be honest. So we've seen some who've completely transformed and, everything's on an iPad or a laptop and everything is digital. Even in court now, there's the move to filing your papers digitally, not taking all those photocopies and bundles to court. So we're seeing that definitely be happening. But, within the fraternity, there are still paper-based lawyers. There are even some who print out every email that they receive in their inbox. Their secretary prints it out for them at the start of the day and puts it on their desk, and they'll go through each one and kind of dictate a response that the secretary then types. So you still have your paper-based lawyers that are trucking around those reams of paper, but there is also that move to digital. So it's a bit of both right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nerushka. Just maybe lastly, what advice would you give maybe to people who are watching this podcast, like in the age of AI? What must they do to protect themselves maybe from cybercrime and just to use it like ethically or without having to get into trouble whilst using AI?
Yeah. So the framework I like to tell everybody is the 3 E's, and that is education, empowerment, and empathy. Education means educate yourself as much as possible on these tools. There's so many free resources out there today. It just takes you to sit down and actually engage with those resources to understand how things work. And that's the first step, to educate yourself, to make sure you're not going to do anything that's going to get you into trouble. The next thing is empowerment, and that is be curious, experiment, play. There's so much opportunity in the world right now. You could be the person to create that next big idea in your field, and your expertise is unique to you. And nobody's going to come along and tell you this is how to innovate in the work that you do. So empower yourself, educate yourself, and experiment and play with these tools to see what they're actually capable of. And the last one is empathy. And I think if we as humans can remember that we are biological beings, we are connected to each other, and we really need to interact with each other from a place of empathy and not from a place of being a robot. Sometimes I think the way the world has been created, or the way we've come to the world today, we behave like robots in our everyday lives. We very kind of, we work from this hour to this hour. We go around in these concrete buildings. We move around in these metal vehicles. Things are very like highly structured. We sit in this digital online meetings the whole day. So we've created these robotic environments for ourselves when we are actually biological beings, when we're actually part of nature. But we've so far removed, we've kind of forgotten this. And that's why we're so afraid of being replaced by artificial intelligence, is because we're behaving like robots. If we remember who we truly are and what our strengths are and what our skill set is, we'll be a lot less afraid, because then we'll see this is a tool that can help us, not necessarily replace us.
Interesting. I've learned something, Nerushka. So it's educate,
Empower.
empower, and
Empathy.
empathy. Okay, that's awesome. And thank you so much, Nerushka. And lastly, I can't wait to attend to your talk at the Security Summit about quantum computing. I think that is a very interesting topic that no one can afford to miss at the summit. We really appreciate you coming here, Nerushka. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I have learned a lot about AI, especially those 3 E's. Thank you very much for watching this episode of ITWeb TV. Today we are talking to Nerushka Bowan, who is the founder of the LITT Institute. She will be at the ITWeb Security Summit, which is happening on the 3rd and 4th of June at the Central Convention Center in Johannesburg. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
This episode of ITWeb TV is brought to you in association with ITWeb Security Summit, celebrating 20 years of bringing together the cybersecurity industry. Visit itweb.coza for more information.